Welcome, brave soul. I am the Forgotten Storyteller. Before we begin, tap that like button if you dare, and drop a comment below telling me where in the world you're listening from. And if you make it to the end of this video, I hope to see you in the next story. I hope you're ready, because I am. Let's begin. It started with a smell. Not the sharp, unmistakable scent of rot, not at first. It was more subtle than that, faintly sour like spoiled milk or meat left too long in the back of the fridge. The kind of smell that you could almost convince yourself wasn't real, just a trick of the breeze. But it lingered, clung to the sidewalk like fog, especially on humid days, and drifted over hedges and fences into the homes of quiet families who suddenly found themselves locking their doors in broad daylight. Our story today begins in a place that could be anywhere. A cul-de-sac like countless others, where the grass is mowed too short and the mailboxes are all the same shade of gray. A place where nothing ever happens, or at least where people believe nothing ever should. Tucked away in the sleepy outer edge of a town you've probably never heard of, the kind of place where the loudest sound is the distant bark of a dog or a lawn-mower sputtering to life on a Sunday morning. But on this street, on this block, something had gone terribly, terribly wrong. Julie and Kevin lived at number 42. The house with the flaking white paint, the overflowing gutters, the sagging roof. The garden was more jungle than lawn, a snarl of weeds and untrimmed hedges. But it wasn't the disrepair that made people uneasy. It was the silence, the emptiness, because for all their noise, shouting matches behind closed doors, crashes that sounded like furniture being thrown, nobody ever saw Julie or Kevin outside. Not once. Not in the garden, not at the grocery store, not walking to the mailbox. Their blinds were always shut, their windows streaked with grime. You could live next door for 10 years and never once catch a glimpse of their faces. And yet, their garden told a different story. Scattered among the uncut grass and dandelions were the relics of a childhood long past. A sun-bleached tricycle with one wheel missing. A plastic playhouse, its door hanging crooked on rusted hinges. A treehouse with rotten planks nestled in the arms of a gnarled oak. And a trampoline, half deflated, sagging like it carried the weight of 100 forgotten summers. No one ever saw children playing there. No giggles, no footsteps, no laughter. But the toys remained silent, watching, waiting. Then one by one the children began to vanish. At first it was just a boy named Jamie. 11 years old, last seen walking home from school. His parents thought he'd gone to a friend's house. A misunderstanding. But when the sun dipped low and the dinner table sat empty, the panic began. The posters went up. The search parties assembled. Dogs sniffed through the woods, helicopters circled. Nothing. Not a footprint. Not a thread of clothing. Then it was Ellie and Mia. Best friends, inseparable since kindergarten. They disappeared during a sleepover at Mia's house. Ellie's parents thought they'd fallen asleep early. Mia's parents assumed they were in the den watching movies. But come morning, the sleeping bags were cold and undisturbed. A back window had been left ajar. And then came Sarah, 7 years old. She was playing at the park, 10 minutes from home. Her mother turned away for 1 second to answer a phone call. When she looked back, Sarah was gone. Vanished. As if the air itself had swallowed her whole. Parents began to pull their children from schools. The parks emptied. The sound of laughter, once so common, so expected, grew rare. Something ancient and instinctual slithered into the hearts of the townspeople. A fear not spoken aloud, but shared behind closed doors and frantic phone calls. And through it all, the house at number 42 stood silently. Until the smell grew worse. It was mid-July when the complaints started. Neighbors wrinkled their noses, stepped outside, and gagged. The scent was undeniable now, rotten, animalistic, thick enough to coat your throat. It seeped through air vents and drifted into dreams. The city council sent inspectors. They knocked. No answer. They left notes. Nothing. They came back, day after day, clipboard in hand, always met with silence. No movement. No reply. Weeks passed. The warnings turned into threats. Final notices were posted. Still, Julie and Kevin said nothing. Then the council called the police. What happened next would make headlines. Not just in that small town, but across the country. For months, even years. A case dissected in documentaries, podcasts, and late-night true crime specials. A story so twisted, so vile, it hardly seemed real. When officers finally forced entry into number 42, they expected to find squatters, maybe a gas leak, perhaps the couple long dead from some tragic accident. But what they found instead shattered every illusion of suburban safety. Every comfort. Every boundary. The house was dark. The curtains hadn't been opened in years. Dust blanketed every surface. The air was thick, warm, heavy with the smell of decay. Muffled sobs echoed from somewhere deep inside. One officer turned back. Another vomited into the bushes. The rest pressed forward, weapons drawn, breath caught in their throats. In the basement they found Julie and Kevin. They were hunched over a table. Not a dining table. Not even a workbench. A steel slab rusted and stained. On it something lay. Something half-formed, grotesque, impossible. A patchwork of limbs, stitched and stapled together like a child's doll made from nightmares. Tiny arms. A crooked spine. Glass eyes embedded into a face that did not belong to one child but to many. Julie turned to the police. Her eyes were wide, glassy. She didn't scream. She didn't run. She simply said, "Isn't she beautiful?" And Kevin just stared. They were arrested on the spot without resistance. The officers didn't need to question what they had seen. The child-shaped horror on the slab, stitched together from missing faces and vanished limbs, spoke louder than any screams ever could. The media would later dub it the creation. Some called it Frankenchild. But the forensic report stripped it of mystery. The body had been constructed from the remains of at least 9 different children. Each one accounted for. Each one marked by the tiny remnants of their DNA. Kevin said nothing during the arrest. Not a word. He simply looked at the monstrosity on the table like a father watching his child being taken away. There was no fear in his eyes. Only resentment. But Julie broke before the cell door even clanged shut. She spilled everything. Her confession was days long, uninterrupted except for food and sleep. The detectives didn't have to pressure her. She wanted to talk. Needed to. Like the truth had been rotting inside her alongside the stench of her house. And only now could she breathe again. Julie had always wanted to be a mother. That much was clear. She spoke about it like an ache, a wound that had never healed. 5 years ago, she'd been diagnosed with severe endometriosis. The doctors told her her uterus was too damaged. Her chances were non-existent. Julie had cried for weeks. Kevin, she said, was supportive at first, but she could tell something in him had shifted. He became cold, detached. And then, slowly, something else bloomed between them. An idea. A plan so ludicrous it began as a twisted joke. But Julie couldn't stop thinking about it. "If we can't make one," she remembered saying to Kevin in the kitchen one night, "maybe we can build one." At first, she meant it metaphorically. Adoption wasn't an option. They'd been rejected before. Surrogacy was too expensive. But the deeper the fantasy became, the more literal it grew. Kevin was the one who took it to the next level. Kevin was the one who researched anatomy, preservation, refrigeration. They started with squirrels, rabbits, roadkill. They learned to stitch, to preserve skin with salt and chemicals. Julie described it like arts and crafts, something they did together on weekends, hidden away from the world. But roadkill was inconsistent, dirty. Kevin suggested something else, something better. Julie cried when she said it the first time. She looked at the officer and whispered, "The first one was Jamie, the boy who never made it home from school." She described it like a story, like someone else had lived it. Kevin had followed him in their car, slowly, silently, until Jamie turned onto a quieter street. Julie had called out to him from the passenger seat, pretending to be lost. She held a map. She looked normal, harmless. Jamie walked over. Kevin pulled him in. Was that easy? Each one after that became simpler. They studied patterns, learned which children were most vulnerable, where parents became distracted, which back doors were unlocked. They used the playhouse in the garden to lure 2 girls. They used a puppy to coax another from a park. They knew their neighbors would never suspect them. People wanted to believe evil didn't live next door. Julie explained how each child was kept alive for a few days, just long enough for Kevin to choose what parts to take. He called it harvesting. It was clinical, mechanical. They'd built soundproofing in the basement. Julie said she wore headphones. Kevin handled most of it. The neighbors never heard a thing. They weren't careless. Every piece of evidence was burned, bleached, buried, or stored in vacuum-sealed bags in a deep freezer. They worked with surgical precision. And in the end, all of it, every cut, every stitch, every horrific choice, was in service of one singular goal: to build their child. A daughter. They named her Lila. Julie referred to the corpse in the basement by that name constantly. Lila's eyes weren't quite right yet, she said. We were going to fix her jaw this weekend. Kevin said he found the perfect spine. It belonged to a gymnast. The detectives listening to her confession were visibly disturbed. Some left the room. One reportedly had nightmares for months after. But Julie kept going. She wasn't trying to reduce her sentence. She didn't want mercy. She wanted people to understand, to see the logic of it, to recognize the love she claimed was at the heart of all the horror. Of course, the courts didn't see it that way. Kevin refused to speak during the trial. Not a word. His defense team pleaded insanity. The prosecution disagreed. Julie, on the other hand, was an open book. She spoke clearly, calmly, admitted everything. Her attorneys begged her to stop. She didn't. The jury took less than 4 hours to deliver a verdict. Guilty. Both were sentenced to life in prison without parole. But it was the moment after sentencing that would haunt the courtroom forever. Kevin had been silent throughout the proceedings. Stoic. Unreadable. But when the judge handed down the sentence and the bailiffs began leading them away, he turned to Julie. For the first time since the arrest. "Look what you've done now," he spat, his voice low, venomous. "All you had to do was stay quiet." Julie didn't flinch, didn't cry. She looked him in the eyes, calm as ever, and said, "After all the evil we did to those innocent children, this was the least I could do. If I could turn back time, I would." And with that, they were gone. Outside the courthouse, a crowd had gathered. Parents of the victims, reporters, curious onlookers. When Julie was escorted to the van, someone threw a bottle. Another screamed, "Monster!" She didn't react. She just stared straight ahead. Kevin kept his head down. The house at number 42 was sealed off within hours of their sentencing. Police tape fluttered in the wind like warning flags. Forensic teams spent weeks inside cataloging horrors nobody should ever have to witness. The basement was stripped down, the soil beneath the floor panels excavated. Cadaver dogs were brought in. Every closet, every crevice, every inch of insulation was combed for the remnants of a tragedy too large to fully contain. But the question remained, how? How had two ordinary people in an ordinary house managed to conceal such monstrous crimes for so long? The answer, like most terrifying truths, was painfully simple. People didn't want to see. Neighbors had heard screams and explained them away. Maybe the TV was too loud. Maybe it was just a fight. They saw the toys in the garden and assumed Julie and Kevin had grandchildren, or maybe they just couldn't let go of the past. The house was a wreck, sure, but lots of people let things go. Mess didn't make you a murderer. And that's exactly what Julie and Kevin had counted on. Authorities discovered that the couple had installed false walls. They had tunnels beneath the foundation, leading to a hidden chamber insulated from sound and heat. Their electrical wiring had been rigged to avoid detection during energy audits. There was even a disguised door behind a wardrobe, leading into what could only be described as a surgical theater. And in that room, under the cold glow of a makeshift operating light, they pieced together their obsession limb by limb, organ by organ, toe by tiny toe. There was evidence that they tried to reanimate the corpse. Scattered among the surgical tools were books on early 20th century electrical stimulation, outdated defibrillators, and pages of notes scribbled in Julie's looping handwriting. Heart rejection is the issue. Keep tissue fresh. Kevin says freezing may slow decomposition, but it ruins elasticity. Look into salt baths again. The spine cracked during repositioning. Devastating. Have to start over. Her smile still isn't right. Even in their madness, they had been meticulous. As the house was emptied, neighbors stood at their windows in silence. Some cried. Others simply stared. It was as if the land itself had become cursed. What had once been an odd house on an ordinary street was now something else entirely, a wound carved into the earth. One neighbor, an elderly woman named Ruth who lived 2 doors down, said she could still hear the faint creak of the garden swing at night. "But no one's been in that yard since," she whispered. Julie and Kevin's families, what little was left of them, refused to claim their belongings. The court declared the property condemned. A demolition order was filed. But no one would agree to tear it down. The demolition companies refused the contract. Too much bad press, too many bad dreams. The last company hired sent a crew out one morning. They made it as far as the driveway before turning around and leaving without explanation. Later, one of the workers admitted that as they approached the front steps, he swore he heard a child's giggle coming from the upstairs window. There were no children in the house. There never had been. The town eventually fenced off the property and let nature reclaim it. The weeds grew shoulder high. The treehouse sagged until it collapsed. The toys remained, slowly being eaten away by rain and time. But no one touched them. They became like tombstones. Unspoken memorials to lives stolen and innocence shattered. It didn't take long for stories to spread. Teenagers dared each other to sneak into the backyard. Some swore they saw shadows in the windows. Others said the swing moved even when there was no wind. One boy claimed he saw a small, pale face peering out from the playhouse, but when he ran closer, it was empty. Urban legends grew like mold. People said the ground was cursed, that no plants would grow where the basement had been, that sometimes if you stood at the edge of the fence and listened hard enough, you could hear the faint sound of a girl humming, a lullaby with no words. The town never really recovered. Families moved away. The elementary school enrollment dropped by nearly half. The park was emptied, then repurposed into a fenced dog run. No one wanted to talk about what had happened, but the silence was louder than words. At town meetings, Julie and Kevin's names were forbidden. A local reporter who tried to publish a book about the case received threats until he left the area entirely. But time, as it always does, moved on. 2 years after the trial, a judge officially ordered the destruction of all forensic materials connected to the case. The remains, those not claimed by grieving parents, were buried in a shared grave at a nearby cemetery. The headstone read simply, "In memory of those taken from us. You are loved. You are not forgotten." Julie remained in prison. She became something of an anomaly, talkative, well-behaved, almost nurturing. She volunteered to teach sewing classes to other inmates. She read psychology textbooks. But every year, on the date of her arrest, she would request one thing: to see Kevin. The request was always denied. Kevin, for his part, had become almost catatonic. He spoke to no one, ate his meals in silence, refused visitors. Prison staff said he kept a folded scrap of cloth hidden in his mattress, one small square of patchwork fabric, made from the remains of a child's dress. When asked about it once during a rare psychological evaluation, he replied, "It's hers," and nothing more. 5 years passed. The media frenzy died down, the news cycle moved on, and number 42 became a kind of scar the town learned to live around. But scars never truly fade. The property remained fenced off, untouched, slowly being overtaken by ivy and decay. Eventually, the council placed a plaque at the front gate, not to memorialize Julie or Kevin, but to acknowledge the victims in a quiet, hesitant way. In this place, darkness once lived. May we always protect the light. But even the light avoided number 42. Kids crossed the street to avoid it. Stray cats refused to go near it. The air around it stayed just a little too still, the silence too deep. One night, a group of teenagers dared each other to sneak into the garden. They made it past the fence and up to the front porch, but when one of them reached for the doorknob, she gasped and recoiled. "It's warm," she whispered. They left in a sprint, never returned, and told no one else what they had seen, or thought they had seen. Some truths are better left buried. Inside prison, Julie waited. Her cell was spotless. She kept a single photo of a baby girl clipped to the inside of her locker, a photo of someone else's child torn from a parenting magazine. She'd given the baby a name, Lila Marie Bennett. She wrote letters to her every week. The prison staff never delivered them, of course. They simply piled up in the warden's office, unopened. Each letter was signed, "Forever your mommy, Julie." Her fellow inmates avoided her. Some were curious briefly until they learned who she was. Then they avoided her like disease. Julie didn't mind. She kept to herself. She had her delusion, her fantasy. In her mind, Lila was real and very beautiful and alive. A child not stitched together from pain and horror, but born whole, laughing, running, calling for her mother from the stairs of a home that never existed. Kevin, by contrast, had grown skeletal. His silence evolved into isolation, his isolation into complete withdrawal. He stared at walls, rocked slightly at night, and only ever muttered one word in his sleep: almost. Almost perfect. Almost alive. Almost a family. When the second psychological evaluation came, required by court order, the psychiatrist tried to reach him. "You were silent at the trial. You've been silent ever since," the doctor said. "But tell me, what did you see in her? In Julie?" Kevin didn't answer for a long time. Then, so softly it was almost inaudible, he said, "She made me believe." "Believe in what?" the psychiatrist asked. Kevin looked up, his eyes hollow. "That we were doing something beautiful." The psychiatrist ended the session early. Outside, the world turned on. Children returned to parks. Parents loosened their grips. The nightmares faded, but never disappeared. Every so often, someone would walk past the old lot on Hollow Creek Lane and pause. No matter the time of day, that patch of land seemed darker, the wind colder, and if you listened, really listened, some swore they could hear it. A faint hum, a childish voice, a lullaby without words carried on the air like fog. Some claimed to see a girl in a white dress in the garden, standing by the old tricycle. Pale skin with button eyes. A jagged smile. The stories always ended the same. When they blinked, she was gone. But they could still hear the soft, rhythmic creaking of the swing. And behind it all, the knowledge, the certainty. Julie and Kevin were locked away. But the darkness they'd birthed had not left. Then one day, Julie stopped writing. No one noticed at first. Her routine had become invisible. Her silence was nothing new. But when the guards did their weekly rounds, they found her sitting upright on her bed, eyes closed, a faint smile frozen on her lips. And she looked peaceful, almost maternal. She was dead. No signs of violence. No suicide note. She had simply stopped. An autopsy revealed nothing. Natural causes, the coroner said. But no one quite believed it. Some whispered that her heart had finally broken. Others thought she had willed herself into death, into some sick reunion with a child that never existed. On her desk was a final letter, sealed, addressed not to Lila but to Kevin. The prison never gave it to him. Instead, they logged it, filed it, and forgot it. Kevin never asked about Julie, never requested her remains. But something in him changed the day she died. He stopped eating for a while, stared longer at the fabric square under his mattress. The rocking at night grew more violent. Then one evening he erupted, screaming, howling, clawing at his own chest. The guards had to sedate him. When they pulled him off the floor, they found something scratched into the concrete over and over again. She was mine. She was mine. She was mine. After that, Kevin never spoke again. He lives now in a psychiatric wing for the criminally insane. Draws pictures of eyes with broken pupils and toys without children. And always, of Lila. In some drawings, she's smiling. In others, she's burning. The psychiatrists say he's gone. That Kevin doesn't exist anymore. Only the father of a girl who never lived. And yet she lingers. Ask anyone in Hollow Creek and they'll tell you they don't believe in ghosts. But they won't walk near number 42 after sundown. The fence still stands, wrapped in vines, warped by time. The garden is now more forest than yard, but one thing remains untouched: the swing. It still creaks, back and forth, even when there's no wind. Years passed. The town rebuilt its rhythms, but never its innocence. New families moved in, unaware of the scar beneath the soil. Children played in the street again, their laughter floating on summer air like music. But something always felt incomplete. Hollow Creek had lost something it could never name, some invisible sense of safety, like a thread pulled loose from a tightly woven quilt. Most folks didn't talk about it anymore. But the memory waited beneath the surface like rot under floorboards. And sometimes, when the wind shifted just right, it surfaced again. There was a boy named Daniel who lived 3 houses down from the old property. One night, while his parents were asleep, he crept out into the backyard and stared at the fence. The moon was high, casting long shadows. He wasn't sure why he felt drawn to it. Just that, something was calling. He climbed up on a bucket, peered over the top. The house was gone, leveled to its foundation. The grass was tall, almost beautiful in the moonlight. And in the middle of it all, the swing still stood. Just then it moved slightly. Daniel rubbed his eyes. A shape sat in the swing. A girl, small and thin, in a white dress that glowed faintly in the dark. Her hair was long, tangled, her skin pale like wax. She didn't speak. She didn't blink. She just stared at him with button black eyes, like she was trying to remember something. Or someone. Daniel stumbled back, slipped from the bucket, and didn't stop running until he was in his bed, shaking beneath the covers. He never told anyone what he saw. But he never went near that fence again. They say trauma lingers. That evil, when nurtured long enough, roots itself in the earth. It becomes a stain, a scent, a hum in the background noise of a neighborhood that should have known better. It lives in old wood, in rusty hinges, in broken toys forgotten beneath thorn bushes. And sometimes, in the dreams of children. The tragedy of Julie and Kevin wasn't just that they hurt those kids. It was that they did it under the veil of normalcy. That their evil wore the mask of longing. That it grew from something so heartbreakingly human, the desire to have a family. But their love had twisted. Their grief had mutated. And in trying to fill the hole inside themselves, they carved holes in others. 9 children lost. 9 families broken. And 1 child built, not from life but from the pieces of it. They gave her a name. They gave her form. And in doing so, they gave her a kind of cursed existence. Now and then, someone still hears the laughter. Not joyful laughter, not the kind that spills from a birthday party or school playground. But hollow and stilted, mechanical. As if a machine were trying to recreate something it had only ever seen from afar. Locals say it comes from the woods behind number 42. That if you follow it, you'll find toys in perfect condition. A jack-in-the-box that still plays, a stuffed bear with one glass eye, a jump rope coiled neatly on the grass. But no children ever go there. Not anymore. The town petitioned to turn the lot into a park once. A memorial garden. They imagined rose bushes and benches and a fountain. But every plan fell through. Every landscaper pulled out. One even left the state entirely, refusing to explain why. He just muttered something about a girl in the swing. The town gave up. Some things aren't meant to be rebuilt. Julie and Kevin's case is now archived, rarely spoken of aloud, but still studied. Professors dissect it in lecture halls. Psychologists debate over Julie's delusions, Kevin's silence. True crime bloggers rehash the details every Halloween. But none of them, not one, has ever visited Hollow Creek. They don't walk the cracked sidewalk outside number 42. They don't smell the faint sweetness that hangs in the summer air. They don't hear the soft creaking at night. But the people who live there? They know. They carry the memory of that house like a weight in the spine. They remember the days of missing posters and quiet vigils. They remember the questions their children asked, the ones they couldn't answer. And in the dead of night, when the wind is calm and the world is still, some of them swear they see her. Lila. The girl who was never born. The girl who should never have been. Swinging softly, her dress brushing the weeds, her face still stitched from the stolen innocence of those who came before her. No eyes. No voice. Just presence. And if you get too close, if you dare step into that garden, she'll stop swinging. She'll tilt her head and smile. So if you ever move to Hollow Creek, and your realtor says the house on the corner is a great deal, if you notice a fenced-off lot at the end of the street, overgrown and too quiet, if your child asks about the toys on the other side of the fence, do yourself a favor. Don't go near the swing. And if you ever hear a lullaby with no words, drifting through the dark, that's the time you need to just run. Because not all children are made from love. Some are made from grief, and pain, and madness. And some, like Lila, were never meant to be. Let us know in the comments, would you go near the swing? And if Lila was on there, would you talk to her?
Ready for spine-chilling tales that will haunt your thoughts. Subscribe to Forgotten Storyteller for eerie narrations, unsettling mysteries, and haunting stories you won't forget. Hit the bell icon so you never miss a story, because some stories refuse to stay buried. Join us, if you dare.